Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to Star Wars Talk Tuesdays, the best day of the week, where we get to talk about, well, my personal favorite thing in the world, which is, of course, Star Wars. And this is our first Star Wars Talk Tuesday since Star Wars The Last Jedi hit theaters. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, obviously, when it comes to the film. A lot of questions coming in. But here's how today's show is going to go. We're going to start off with 5 subjects and topics and questions that you guys have emailed into me. Now, how do you get a topic or question on Star Wars Talk Tuesdays? It's real simple. You just email me anytime at john@thejohncampeashow.com. That's john@thejohncampeashow.com. And make sure you put SWTT, that stands for Star Wars Talk Tuesdays. Put SWTT in the subject line. That way I know your question is coming in to be on Star Wars Talk Tuesdays. Now, of course, once we get through the first half of the show, taking your emails, we're going to go over to the live questions for those of you guys who are watching live. 2 ways to get live questions on. One is by use of the super chat. That guarantees your question gets asked. The second way, if we have time near the end of the show, we're going to go to your live Twitter questions as well. And you can simply follow me on Twitter and tweet to me just at John Campea. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get on with the first topic today. We got some good stuff to talk about regarding Star Wars The Last Jedi. We got some negative stuff to talk about regarding The Last Jedi. So let's just dive into it here. The first question today comes to us from Mark Hunter, who writes, "Hey John, I saw The Last Jedi on opening night, and I have to say that I did have a few issues with the movie, but overall I loved it. Anyways, I recently saw a review done by Entertainment Tonight Canada, and the guy just rips into the movie. My question to you is this: is this movie being misunderstood by Star Wars fans?" All right, well, thanks a lot for the question, man. And first of all, we got to understand, there are hundreds of film critics out there. And other than, you know, the Toy Story movies, which have 100% rating and stuff like that, other than that, every movie is going to have some critics that don't like it. And every horrible movie is going to have some critics that do like it. I mean, so let's not be surprised that there are a couple of critics out there that don't like the film. Of course there are. It's a movie, and all film is subjective. Now, as far as you asking, are there some Star Wars fans that just don't understand The Last Jedi? Let me put it this way. Do I believe there are some people out there who just misunderstood or didn't get, or like the meaning of things flew over their head? Sure, maybe there are some. But what I find is that for the most part, people who really like Star Wars The Last Jedi, and I'm one of them. I'm one of the people who really like Star Wars The Last Jedi. But we have to be careful, because I'm finding a tendency amongst people who did like Star Wars The Last Jedi just to try to write off anybody who doesn't like it by saying, oh, they just misunderstood it. No, they watched it and they just didn't like it. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's what the great thing about being a movie fan is that we can watch movies and like them, or have a bad experience with them and not like them. Just because somebody doesn't like a movie that we like does not mean that they misunderstood it. I mentioned this before on the John Campea Show, but we need to not get in the habit of making excuses for other people not liking what we like. We can't get into that habit. Are there some people who don't understand it? I think, sure, there are some. I've had a few discussions with people who would bring up these issues like, wait a minute, but that's not what happened in The Last Jedi. This happened. Oh, I mean, sure, there's some people like that, but for the most part, it's a movie, and people watched it, and some didn't like it. A bunch of people did, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with either of that. So, are some people misunderstanding it? Sure. But I think for the most part, if there are people out there who maybe don't like the film, they just didn't like it because they watched it and didn't like it. It's really just that simple. We don't need to make excuses for people not sharing our opinions. And that's the important thing for us to stand. That's the thing that's going to keep us as Star Wars fans and as movie fans in general, having different points of view and still being on the same team, is when we're able to say, you know what, you didn't like or you did like something I didn't like. I'm not going to make an excuse for why you did or didn't like it. You did or didn't like it for your own reasons, and that's totally cool. We're still on the same team. We're fellow movie fans together. That's the key. That is the key there. So let's not make excuses for other people not sharing our opinion. All right, let's move on to the next question. The next question comes to us from Evan, and Evan writes, "John, I'm a huge fan." Thank you so much, Evan. "I love this show. Since we now know Rey's lineage, do you think Rey could take on the Skywalker last name to honor Luke? Since her real last name doesn't really matter, I think it would be a cool way to carry on the Skywalker name. Thanks, and may the Force be with you. And you know what? That's a great question that reminded me that what I should have said off the top of the show is that, look, this is a Star Wars show. Star Wars is now out in theaters. I understand there's going to be some of you guys out there that haven't had a chance to see it yet, and you're still trying as much as possible to avoid spoilers if you can. That one wasn't so bad. There are a number of questions being brought up today that will get into spoilers. So I just want to give you that warning. If you haven't already heard about all the details in the movie and you haven't seen the movie yet, just be warned that we will be going into spoiler material here moving forward in the show, okay? Just want to make sure I give you that heads up. Okay, now as far as Rey taking on the Skywalker name, let's really put it this way. Did Rey put her on her path, or did Luke put Rey on her path? Sure. Did he open her up to things that she hadn't been opened up to yet? Yes. Did he ultimately save them all at the end? Sure. But, I mean, she knew him for, I don't know what the exact passage of time on that island was. I don't know if she was there for a week, if she was there for a month. I have no idea. The movie doesn't do a very good job giving us a clear indication. For all we know, she was there for a day or two. Or maybe she's there for a week, or maybe she's there for a month. No idea. We're just going to have to wait and find out, for sure. But I think, whatever it was, it's probably not long enough that she takes on his namesake. Plus, on top of that, and maybe I'm alone in this, I am ready for Star Wars to move on from the Skywalker name. And you know me, Luke Skywalker is my favorite character in all of Star Wars. I love the Skywalker story, but you also know my opinion on this. Star Wars is not about the Skywalkers. It's just not. There is a small window in the history of Star Wars. There's this one little window that starts with Anakin and then apparently ends with The Last Jedi, where the Skywalker family line is very prominent. But you've heard me use this illustration before too. It's much like America, for a very small window of time, was really about the Kennedys. But that started and that stopped. America was along way before the Kennedys, will be around way after that particular bloodline. So we move on from it, and I am actually ready, as a Star Wars fan, I am ready to move on from the Skywalker lineage. Let's now move into the next chapter of the Star Wars galaxy. Just as there were thousands of years of chapters before, Anakin was ever born, now we've got more generations ahead after the death of Luke. So I don't think they'll have her take on his name. It would be an interesting thing if they did, and I'm not going to complain if they do. But for me, I'm ready for Star Wars to move on from the Skywalkers and move into the next chapter and see the new generation and see new stories that need to be told and all that kind of stuff. So, you know me, original trilogy forever, baby. But I'm still willing and ready to move on to the next hero, if you will. All right, thanks a lot for the question, man. Let's move on to the next one. And the next one comes to us, the next one I should say, comes to us from Joseph Lowe Ree, who writes, you put up a video saying that The Last Jedi would probably have a 60% drop in its second weekend, with one reason being some people not liking the film. However, I see no legitimate evidence of this with Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic and CinemaScore being around the same as The Force Awakens. Where are you seeing a huge audience divide if mostly everyone seems to like this as much as The Force Awakens? Well, first of all, Joseph, and what he's referring to is I put up a video, I believe yesterday, I put up a video that was basically about how I am predicting that Star Wars The Last Jedi will take a 60% or greater drop in its second weekend. And I said there were 4 reasons. Reason number 1, to drop less than 60%, it needs to make $90 million in its second weekend. Only 4 films in cinematic history have ever made $90 million on its second weekend. Only 4. Next, I said with the movie being the second biggest opening of all time with $220 million, that means a lot of people have already seen the movie. So that's working against it. Number 3, I said, was because there are a legitimate number of people out there. I don't think it's 50-50. It's not. It is not 50-50. But there are a legitimate number of people out there who straight up just didn't like this movie, and they talk very loudly. So that's going to affect it. And then my final reason was the fact that it's going to have some very, very stiff competition. It's got 3 major releases opening on its second weekend. You got Pitch Perfect 2, or Pitch Perfect 3. And remember, Pitch Perfect 2 opened to almost $70 million on its opening weekend. You got the biggest box office draw movie star in the world right now in The Rock opening up Jumanji. And then you got The Greatest Showman. So, I mean, it's got, you put all 4 of those things together, I believe Star Wars The Last Jedi is going to take a 60% or greater drop at the box office. I think it would be remarkable. If it doesn't drop 60%, I think that's outstanding. Like, that's unbelievable. If it can handle all that and take less than a 60% drop, that is going to be earth-shaking to me. But when you take all those 4 reasons together, I believe it's going to take more than a 60% drop. Now, you're saying you don't see this big divide, and that's cool. It depends on the circles you walk in. For example, like we talked about this before, the IMDb user rating is quite high. The CinemaScore rating is very high. The critic ratings are quite high. The Rotten Tomatoes audience rating is a little over 50%, so it's low. So I think that tells me there are a significant number of people out there. It is not split down the middle, though. Somebody else, I think, on one of my shows gave it a great example. They think the online hardcore Star Wars fans are split, and the general movie-going audience seems to be embracing it and loving it. And I think that's probably the best way to describe it at this point. But make no mistake. I mean, I spend a lot of time on my Twitter feed and in my comment sections and going around various chat boards around just to try to put my finger on the pulse of where the fan stuff is. And I still believe the majority of people do really like Star Wars Last Jedi. However, there are a good, legitimate number of people who don't. There are. There's no point, like, I don't believe that the thing is divided. However, that doesn't mean we ignore the fact that there are a legitimate number of people out there who don't. There really are. And are they just a very vocal minority? Yes, but they are not a tiny minority. Minority? Yes. Tiny minority? No. They're not some small, insignificant group of people hanging out in the backwaters of whatever Louisiana. I mean, no, there is a legitimate number of people out there who don't, and we just have to acknowledge that. And you know what? That doesn't change the fact that I like the film. Nor is the fact that I like the film, should that change your opinion if you don't like the film. It's all good, but they are there. There's no point in denying it. They are there, absolutely. All right, next question comes to us from Ian Turner. And Ian Turner writes, after our heroes resolve the issue of the Empire in the original trilogy, we find ourselves in a largely similar situation after The Last Jedi. Am I wrong to worry that if there is an episode 10, 11, and 12, then that means whatever problems resolved in 7, 8, and 9 will be reversed again? Well, thanks a lot for the question. And this is actually something I was talking with a buddy of mine about. Here's the thing. What she's saying in her email is like, hey, there was a big galactic problem and the heroes solved it at the end of Return of the Jedi. But now here we are in the new trilogy and it's just like the problems are back again. That's life. I mean, there is no such thing as happily ever after. You know this, I know this. In real life, John, we're talking about Star Wars. I know, but follow me here. In real life, there is no such thing as happily ever after. Right? There's just not. You get faced with a set of challenges and problems in life, and hopefully you can meet and conquer those challenges and those difficulties and those roadblocks. However, once you get around those challenges and difficulties and roadblocks, the next set of challenges and difficulties and roadblocks are not that far down the road. You know this. You've experienced this in life, so have I. To me, it's just even more remarkable that it seems like the galaxy in the Star Wars universe was able to have relative peace for 25 years. That's the part that seems more remarkable to me. The fact that eventually something else, like a remnant of that movement, resurged itself and came back and tried to, menace the galaxy once again, that's not surprising. The surprising thing to me is that it took 25 years. So here we are. The galaxy is facing a huge challenge. And guess what? If by the end of episode 9 they defeat that challenge, eventually there's going to be another challenge that comes along and threatens the galaxy. Because that's how the world works. That's how our real life works. So why should we expect that the Star Wars universe should be any different? And besides, if there was happily ever after, there's really no more stories to tell. If it was all happily ever after. But you and I both know there's no such thing as happily ever after. Now, what I don't want them to do is once they resolve the issue of the First Order after Episode 9, is then whenever Episodes 10, 11, and 12 come along, don't have it be yet again a resurgence of the old Empire. Make it something different. Whether you want to go back into the, Star Wars Legends, the old EU stuff, maybe bring in the Yuzhang Vong, or maybe bring in some other type, maybe make the, Black Sun, or whatever you want to do. If you want to go off into the old EU and bring in new threats, that's great. I just hope they don't go back to remnants of the Empire re-emerging again. We need to move on from that after Episode 9. I'm great with it coming back to it now, because it just makes sense the way they politically set up their universe, that you would have a resurgence of something that was sympathetic to the Empire to come back. I get it. That's great. But if you move on to Episode 10, 11, and 12, it's time to do something different. And there will always be a new threat to the galaxy. Even once the heroes win the day, another day is coming when a new threat is going to arise. And that's the way it is in comic books, that's the way it is in life, and that's the way it is in the Star Wars universe. All right, thanks a lot for the question. We move on now to the final email question today. And the final email question today comes to us from Ryan Roper. And Ryan Roper writes, "Hey John, big fan of all your content. Thank you so much, Ryan. Please keep your show as intimate as it is now as your channel grows." Well, I'll certainly try my best, Ryan. My question is simple. Is DJ the same codebreaker that Maz refers to, and did he just lose his lapel pin to the suave character we see at the table? DJ looks more like the kind of guy that would hang around Maz's bar. Thanks, and keep up the great work. Thanks again, Ryan. All right, thanks a lot, Ryan. And look, I've heard a number of people with that theory. That what if, Benicio Del Toro's character was the right guy all along? And it just so happens that Rose and Finn get arrested before they have a chance to talk to the guy with the lapel rose pin and get thrown in the exact same jail cell as the codebreaker they were sent there to find. That's a lot of coincidences. But at any rate, but he is a great codebreaker, so they come across him. I don't think he's the guy that Maz was referring to. First of all, I didn't like that Maz Kanata was in this at all. I liked her in The Force Awakens, but Poe never met her. Finn met her once. They just happened to have her number on speed dial to call her and talk. They didn't know her. I mean, seriously, why was she even in this movie? That was so forced and shoehorned. That's one of the big things I did not like about The Last Jedi, was that whole Maz Kanata thing. That was totally pointless. Anyway, I don't think that Benicio Del Toro's character was the guy she's referring to, because I don't know if a guy who was that shady and would literally just turn around and double cross them like that, I don't know if that's a guy that Maz would send them to. I don't know that Maz would send them to a guy like that without giving them warning. By the way, this guy will stab you in the back the first chance he gets. The first moment that things appear to be inconvenient for him in helping you, he's going to double cross you, something bad, so keep your eye on him. It just doesn't seem like that's what Maz Kanata would do. On that level, I think it's a much smaller coincidence that they happen to bump into another guy who is a codebreaker than the huge coincidence it would have to be that they got to the planet, found the guy with the rose petal, but weren't able to talk to him to find out that he wasn't the right guy, get arrested, and then thrown in the exact same prison cell that the real codebreaker was in the first place. That seems a little bit ridiculous. But you never know. It is the world of Star Wars. The ridiculous has been known to happen. So maybe that's the case. But no, I personally don't think that that Benicio Del Toro was the original codebreaker that Maz Kanata sent them to find. I don't think that was the guy. You are right, though. He does seem like the type of guy who would hang out in her cantina, for sure. But I don't think that was the guy, for all the reasons I already explained. Okay, guys, that's all the stuff that I picked out in advance from the questions that you guys sent in. I'm now going to go over to the live questions. You guys have been waiting patiently. Thank you so much for that. So let's get into the live questions. And the first live question today comes to us from Anthony R., who writes, "That casino scene was so weird. It felt too Earth-like to me. Even with the aliens, that was something out of the Fifth Element." Yeah, to me, and I don't mind something that feels Earth-like. I don't mind that here and there. I mean, like Luke sitting down with his uncle and aunt having breakfast. That felt Earth-like. Nothing wrong with that. but it felt prequelish to me. There's the whole thing felt off. And again, I get what Rian Johnson was going for. He was rolling the dice. He was trying something new and trying something different, and it didn't work. But it didn't work. I mean, I agree with you, Anthony. It just felt weird, felt out of place, felt forced. That stupid horse race thing, I just felt was absolutely unnecessary. It's just like, hey, we got 50 more million to blow on visual effects. What do you want to do? How about a giant alien horse race? Okay. And then they jump on horses and go. I mean, I love the movie, but I have my problems with it, and that is one of the problems I have with it. I didn't like that at all. So I'm with you on that, Anthony. All right. The next one comes to us from Duan Garces de Oliveira, who writes, but John, if you check the remaining questions from part 1 to 2 in the Last Jedi review, I can't help but wonder why you skipped over... I didn't skip any questions, unless I just accidentally missed your question, Duan. Put your question in again, and let me know what your question was. Let's see. And Antonio De Grantis writes, what's your thoughts on the visuals in the Force Awakens battle between Rey and Kylo? The red-blue sabers clashing, the snowy forest made for a great scene. Oh, visually, I thought that was great. I love that scene. I really do. I thought that scene was fan-frickin-tastic. I loved it. And you're right, it was visually beautiful. And when you have the dark forest with white snow, with those colors illuminating in the darkness, as it were, it just created for just this visual palette that was beautiful to look at. I loved it. I think you're absolutely right, Antonio. That scene to me was visually gorgeous. I love the cinematography in it. Thanks for bringing that up. And then we come back to Duan. Duan writes, asked about Luke's non-Jedi demeanor in contemplating to kill. Can't agree with you that all was lost. Even he says to Leia, nobody's ever completely gone. Luke in the original trilogy would not have done that. But yeah, but Duan, that was 30 fucking years ago. People change. People go through trauma. People go through, real individuals go through things, and we change and evolve. Luke has seen some shit in his life, to the point that when he looked into his nephew and saw the amount of darkness that was in him, don't tell me for a second that Luke Skywalker, the guardian of peace and justice in the galaxy, wouldn't have at least contemplated ending that now, because he knows what that leads to. It leads to the loss of millions of people. It leads to genocide across the galaxy. He has seen it with his own eyes. And he caught himself in a moment of weakness. And I gave the illustration of this before. I don't care how good of a person you are. If you were able to time travel and you come face to face with a young Adolf Hitler, knowing what this kid is going to do and be and become, and the travesty and the horror and the genocide and the millions of deaths caused by him, you're going to tell me there's not a temptation there to, even though this little kid hasn't done anything yet, you know what's coming, to kill that kid. I'm not saying you should kill the kid. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But don't tell me for a second that there's not that urge there. There's not that at least temptation. That it doesn't seem to you, even for a second, that the greater good here is to stop this threat now. And if I don't stop this threat now, then the blood of millions is going to be on my hands. Of course, when Luke looks into that depth and sees that much evil, that much power, that much, darkness, of course it goes through his head. He's seen the results. He knows what happens. He knows the horrors that come as a result of somebody like this running free through the galaxy. So of course he was tempted. And being Luke Skywalker, he stopped. So honestly, I don't get, anyway, this whole notion of saying, Duan, that, the Luke from the original trilogy, well, guess what? Luke isn't a 19-year-old farm boy anymore. He's seen the shit. He's seen his friends die. He's been in X-Wings beside his buddy Biggs and seen his best friend die. He's seen the result of Alderaan being destroyed. He's seen the horrors of what comes. And that, over years and years and years, contemplating it, and then out of nowhere, seeing that same evil again. And you're going to tell me that he wouldn't at least momentarily think that and struggle that the right thing to do may not be to snuff this evil out before it comes to fruition, it comes to pass? And he didn't. And you know what the result is? Now Luke is now living with the deaths of everybody that Kylo Ren is responsible for killing since that point. It's on him. And that has weighed him down even more and made him go into exile. I mean, honestly, the humanity in Luke is what made all this necessary. At least that's what it is to me. And I get there's some people looking at saying that's not what they wanted Luke to do. That's not what they wanted Luke to be. I get it. That's totally cool. I'm just saying, let's not pretend that a guy in his situation wouldn't be thinking that, because you would have too. And because he's Luke Skywalker, he stopped. And because he stopped, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions have died at the hands of Kylo Ren and him helping the First Order. And all that now weighs on Luke. I mean, it's a tragic, beautiful, disturbing conundrum that Luke faces. And that's one of the things I really loved about that movie, was that it took us there. Nope, just all heroes are all shiny. No, heroes are human, and they struggle, and they have temptations, and they face darkness and evil, and they have trauma, and it was a powerful scene to me that I just think far too many people write off as just, oh, Luke wouldn't do that. Then honestly, I think you're not thinking about it enough. I think you're not thinking it through. Because to me, it was one of the most powerful moments in that movie that really exhibited the humanity of Luke Skywalker to me. That I loved. And it didn't work for you. That's fine. I get it. That's totally cool, man. But I just see it so very differently than you do. I see it so very differently. But that's one of the fun things about being film fans, man. We get to have different points of view. All right, we move on now to the Batfleck, who writes, Kylo Ren is basically the embodiment of Yoda's statement in Return of the Jedi. Once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. It really is. It really is. Now, the one catch to that was Vader himself. Luke knew the good was still in Vader. So Yoda said that. So Yoda thought Vader was a write-off. So did Obi-Wan. But Luke, being his son, knew that there was still good in him. He knew it. And because there was still good in him, when Vader came face to face with his son, that conflict grew because he loves his son. That conflict grew even more. And Luke even sensed that even more. More and more he was sensing it. So, but I believe the thing with Kylo Ren, because at the end, I think there probably was a moment when Kylo, because we see the hesitation before he kills Han. We see the hesitation before, when he had the opportunity to kill Leia, he hesitated. That was there. But by the time we get to the final battle on Crate, that goodness, that light that was still in him is gone. Rey knew that it was gone. Luke knew that it was gone. And most importantly, his own mother, Leia, knew it was gone. They all sensed it, and they all realized it, and they knew it. All that's left now is Kylo Ren. Anakin used to say, Anakin Skywalker is gone. There's only Darth Vader now. He could say that, but he was just tricking. He was just fooling himself. That goodness was still there. He was just putting on a show. Kylo really is all that's left now. And you're right. He becomes the embodiment, the Batfleck, of exactly what you're saying. He becomes the embodiment of what Yoda warned about, that once you start down the dark path, it'll forever dominate your destiny, and Kylo went that way. So I don't believe there's any redeeming Kylo Ren. The next one comes to us from Tom Macari, who writes, keep up the great work, John. Thank you so much, Tom. I just want to say that I loved this movie. There were a few things I would change, but I loved how it was unpredictable. Most of the heroes' plans failed. Yeah, normally just everything goes according to plan. And if there's a road bump or two, they eventually get back to their plan. In this one, the heroes' plans just failed. Like, and at every step. At every step, the hero's plan failed, okay? So let's follow it here. We're going to escape from the base, go through hyperspace. And the bomber's going to drop the bombs, and we're going to be good. Didn't work. All the bombers got wiped out. They did take out a dreadnought, which is good, I guess. But then they try their escape, and the escape doesn't work because there's hyperspace tracking technology. Okay, that didn't work. Finn and Rose have this plan. We're going to go get this codebreaker, get onto the Star Destroyer, and we're going to decommission their hyperspace tracker, letting us get away. That didn't work. Okay, we're going to go down to Crate, and we're going to send out a signal to our allies in the Outer Rims who are going to come and stand with us against the First Order. That didn't work. None of their plans worked. And I ate that up. I thought it was great. It's like things don't always go the hero's way. Sometimes they just don't. And I really like the fact, I'm with you on that. I like the fact that that happened. All right, let's move on now to the next question. This one comes to us from Brimp70, who writes, Maul was cut in half by a lightsaber and he lived. Snoke, not so much. That is the reason why I said on Sunday that Maul was more powerful than Snoke. Well, no, remember, Maul, he was cut in half, yeah, and you might even survive that for a bit. I mean, you can get cut in half and still be alive for a bit. And I can't remember exactly what happened in the cartoon, but once he hit the bottom, then these other things came out and basically saved him. He got saved. Nobody was there to save Snoke. Snoke got cut in half, and then he was just left there to die. And there was no, little things coming out of the woodwork to piece him back together and put him back together in some other type of monstrosity's body. That didn't happen for him. So I see what you're saying, but understand those were not two equal circumstances. If they were in two equal circumstances, if Darth Maul got cut in half in that room and was just left there to die by himself, but eventually pulled himself back up, got onto a ship, flew off across the galaxy, saved himself and stayed alive, then maybe it's the same situation. But the Snoke's death situation is different than Darth Maul's death situation, because Darth Maul had some help, Snoke did not. So that's why I don't agree with you that Snoke is more powerful, or that Maul was more powerful than Snoke. Their circumstances were much, much different. Let's see. But thanks for revisiting that with me, Brimmick. Antonio de Grantis writes, do you think there will be a big time jump in episode 9? I think so. But let's define time jump. Let's define big. I don't think it'll be the next day. I think it will be like 2 years later. And I think in the opening, and by the way, I'm not basing this on anything. Nobody has told me this. This is just me speculating, okay? I think what we're going to get is an opening crawl of, the gallant General Leia has been working feverishly to amass her allies and blah, blah, blah. And I think we're going to see when episode 9 starts, there's going to be a semblance of the resistance again. We're going to be more than just 30 people left or 40 people left, however many were left in the resistance by the end of that movie. And I think you're going to see she's put together a military again. Maybe not a huge military or anything like that, but I think we're going to do that. So I think probably 1 or 2 years is when we're jumped across. Again, no one's told me that. I can't base on anything. That's just me taking a guess. Okay, let's move on. JT Smith writes, thoughts on Broome Kid? Well, I've talked about that a few times. I think it was great. To me, because some people have been asking me, the kid at the end with the broom, is episode 9 going to be about him? Is the new trilogy going to be about him? And I don't think that was the point of Broome Kid. I think the point of Broome Kid at the end, as Leia was talking to Rey and saying, we have everything we need for a rebellion, I think that shot was the story telling us that the Force is still at work. Life goes on. The Force still moves. And while, darkness rises, light rises to meet it. There are new generations of Jedi being born. I mean, remember, that's how it always was. A lot of people think, well, how can Rey have powers if she didn't come from Jedi lineage? Because all Jedi through thousands of years did not come from Jedi lineage. They were just born. And there are exceptions, of course, throughout the stories, but for the most part, they're just born. And I love that they showed us that scene, because as long as the light side of the Force is at work and new children are being born Force sensitive, hope exists in the galaxy. And to me, that was the message of showing us that shot of the kid using the Force, is that hope still exists in the galaxy. Luke was right about that. Luke could disappear, and the Force still lives. And hope will still be sown throughout the galaxy because it's the Force. And I love, on that level, Luke was right. He says, the Force doesn't need me, whatever. And he was right about that, but he did need to step in and save them all at the end, which was kind of great. But those are my thoughts on Broome Kid. I thought it was wonderful. Let's see. By the way, guys, I'm going to ask you, if you have not yet sent in a super chat, please do not send any more in, because I just want to be able to get through the ones that we've got here already. So if you've already sent one in, it will get answered, but please don't send in any more. Okay, moving on to Allan Jensen, who writes, greetings from Denmark. Greetings. Seeing The Last Jedi for the 3rd time tomorrow and ordered a Luke Skywalker hot toy figure. Are you a fan of hot toys? Well, I mean, You see a few of them behind me here. Yes, I am a fan of Hot Toys. I don't have a ton of them because they are expensive. So I don't have a whole ton of them, but I am a fan of Hot Toys. And I think I know the Luke one you're talking about. And I am burning a little bit with jealousy inside right now as we speak. If that's the one you're getting that I'm thinking of, then I am burning with jealousy. So good on you. So do me a favor, just email in a picture of it once you get it out of the box. I'd be curious to see that. All right, next one comes to us from Lucas C., who writes, the only thing that is really bothering me is Rey's vision when she touched Anakin's saber. Why did that happen? The Last Jedi didn't clear it up. There was nothing to clear up. She saw what she saw. I mean, there was nothing in there. Like, some people have been talking to me as if, you know, they contradicted what's in the vision. It's like, no, they didn't. Nothing that she saw in the vision was contradicted. She was I mean, it was really her first big eye-opening thing that she has a part to play in all of this. Highlighted by, you know, Obi-Wan's words we hear whispering at the end of her vision, Rey, you've taken your first steps. That was a significant part. That was the first time she really immersed into the Force, was that vision. And there was nothing in the vision that was contradicted, nor were there any mysteries brought up in the vision. So I'm not really quite sure what people are saying that when they say that the Last Jedi didn't clear up the vision. Well, there's nothing to clear up. It was a vision. I mean, that's all it was. She saw a little bit of the past, the present, and a little bit of the future. And that's what it did. I mean, Yoda's talked about that before, that sometimes the Force will show us this, places far away, times long past, and sometimes the future. And that's what she saw in her vision. So I'm not really quite sure where anybody... And, you know, I went back and watched a bit of The Force Awakens the other day. And I still don't get, after watching the vision sequence, I'm still not quite sure where anybody's coming from that thinks there was some mystery involved in it or something in The Last Jedi contradicted it. I just don't see it. But anyway, if you know something specific that you're thinking of, email it to me and I'll see if I can address that, because maybe I'm missing something. I do miss things. So there you go. All right. Dwan writes, JJ was surprised how things panned out. What proves he was not that involved in the creative choices? Why hint the Plagueis theme with Snoke? Why get Ewan to record his voice in Rey's Force vision? JJ was involved. I mean, Ryan had total creative freedom with limitations. Ryan had total creative freedom, but he and JJ, Rian Johnson's talked about this, that they gave him all the creative freedom, but he met with JJ and them all along. He planned with them. So, and Ryan said, they gave me a clean slate that I could do whatever, but they worked with him and he worked with them. And so, no, none of this was like a total surprise to J.J. Abrams or anything like that. I mean, he was involved. The Plagueis thing was, again, look, the Plagueis thing, you remember I bought into the Plagueis theory for a little while. I did. But it's much like the whole Rey is Luke's daughter thing. The movie never said that, but a bunch of people just convinced themselves that that's what they were doing and were absolutely convinced that Rey is a Skywalker. Despite the fact that I try to tell everybody for the longest time, the movie makes it very clear that she is not a Skywalker. The Force Awakens makes it completely clear that she is anything but a Skywalker. But a lot of people were bought into the theory. So I think it's just kind of the same mentality there, Dwan. I really do. I think it's just kind of the same mentality. So, and Rian Johnson is a very collaborative filmmaker. He talked a lot about how available JJ made himself to him and all this kind of stuff. So there was work together. But they did give Rian, you know, carte blanche. Like, you're the director of this one, you're in charge. And Rian decided to use his authority by convening a lot with J.J. Abrams and with other writers, and a little bit with Lawrence Kasdan too, by the way. So, I mean, that's all stuff to keep in mind. Let's see. Dwan writes again, Snoke looks like the Prime Jedi on the mosaic inside the First Jedi Temple. You know what? You're not wrong. I hadn't thought of that. You know what? I need to pull up the picture again. But I think you're onto something there. Does that mean anything? Not necessarily. Does it just mean, hey, maybe, you know, whatever humanoid race he is, there was another old ancient Jedi who was the same kind of ancient, you know, humanoid race, much like humans are humanoid? Maybe. Maybe it means more than that. That's interesting. I'll have to look into that again. Thanks for bringing that up. Grand Rue 10 writes, Hux betrays Kylo in Episode 9? Oh, I think so. At least he might try. Either that or he's just like a little bit too sniveling. Or maybe he's just too loyal. I mean, maybe, look, Hux, if anything, loyalty seems to mean a lot to him. And if you read the novels, we get a little bit more into Hux's backstory with Hux and his father, the former General Hux, who's no longer with us. That, you know, that kind of stuff, loyalty is important. Then again, he kind of conspired to kill his own father too at the same time. So I don't know, maybe, but I think he knows there's not much he can do against Kylo Ren. But does he make a move against him? Maybe. Remember, at the end of this movie, he says, "You dare to think about my troops?" Like, Hux sees the military as his military. So maybe you're onto something. Maybe he does make a move against Kylo in Episode 9. Let's see. The Batflick says, "Did you cry when Luke died at the end?" No, I didn't cry. I very, very, very rarely cry in films. Only a handful of times have I ever, but I was in awe. I was in awe. I thought it was so perfect that he had just done this amazing, probably the greatest exhibition of force power the universe had ever seen. And then he's sitting there, much hearkening back to the first Star Wars movie, looking out at the suns and that music playing, and then he quietly disappears into the Force. Ah, I loved it. I didn't cry, but I loved it. I mean, I had goosebumps at it, but I didn't cry. All right, let's see. Charlie15Z writes, "What do you think about Episode 9 being about Rey and the new Jedi versus Knights of Ren? First lightsaber war in the movies could be cool to see." I don't think we're going to see a new generation of Jedi yet, but I do believe that the Knights of Ren are going to play a prominent role in this movie. I think since Kylo Ren is the master of the Knights of Ren, I think they are going to be his primary henchmen in the upcoming movie, and that it's going to be like a video game where you got to go through different levels of bosses before you get to the big boss. I think Rey is going to have to deal with a couple of those Knights of Ren earlier in the film before ultimately it comes down to her and Kylo Ren. So I 100% believe that the Knights of Ren are going to be playing a part in this. I just don't know that we're going to see new Jedi yet. I don't think that's going to be part of it yet. Okay, let's move on here. Anthony R. writes again, "When the FO found the resistance through First Order through hyperspace, I thought it was because Kylo was tracking Leia through the Force. Would have been more interesting." I don't know that they've ever kind of exhibited that kind of an ability or a power. I mean, Vader clearly never had that power. Or else every time that, you know, the rebels escaped at the last second through hyperspace, Vader could have just tracked them. So that's clearly a power Vader didn't have. So, I don't know. I think the same. Remember, they just showed that hyperspace tracking technology, they did an Easter egg of that in Rogue One. If you go back to Rogue One, that very technology, the development of that technology is mentioned in Rogue One, which then comes to fruition in this movie. I thought that was kind of interesting, to be honest with you. I thought that was a cool thing. All right, this next one comes to us from Robert, and Robert writes, "Should Rey have joined Kylo? Would be an interesting direction for 9. I heard a few saying now there is nothing interesting going into 9 plot-wise." Oh, I don't believe that at all. Don't believe that at all. Nobody said, Luke didn't go dark in Empire Strikes Back. No, there's nothing interesting in, for Return of the Jedi. No, I think there is a world of things to do here. Now you have Kylo, who is now the supreme leader. So, in essence, Vader has become Emperor. So Kylo is now leading the First Order. What was the Republic is still in shambles. It's pretty much non-existent anymore. They now have one movie where they got to gather up a new force, no pun intended, to try to stand against them. Rey now knows her place in all this. We're going to have the Knights of Ren coming back. Ultimately, it's finally going to come down between Kylo and Rey. Anybody who's saying that there's nothing interesting left to happen in Episode 9, hey man, all film's subjective, but I don't know what to tell you. If that's how you feel, I just don't know what to tell you. I mean, you feel the way you feel. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I'm just saying I don't know what to tell you. I think there's still a whole hell of a lot left to do. Let's see here. One of my favorite usernames on here, which just disappeared because a whole bunch more questions just came flying in. Let's see. Oh my gosh. Okay, gosh, guys, really, so many questions came in. Make sure you do not send in any more questions, please. I can't think of a good username writes, "I don't know if this is a spoiler, but I honestly thought Benicio Del Toro was going to be Ezra because he had the 2 scars that Ezra has on his cheek, but that wasn't the case." Hey, look, I never thought, oh my gosh, wait a minute, there were still questions before that. Okay, I'll jump back there in just a second. I never thought for a second really thought that Ezra or any character from, by the way, Ezra's age would have been all wrong. If Benicio Del Toro was Ezra, the age was all wrong. But I never thought we were going to really see anybody from Rebels in it. But John, we saw Chopper in Rogue One. Well, yeah, we saw for a split second Chopper roll by in the background. And also for a split second, we saw the Ghost in the background of the space battle. Yes. But really, I never really thought we were going to see anybody there. But even though I never thought that's what they were going to do, I acknowledge it was possible. I mean, it's possible they could have gone that way, right? I mean, so I can totally see why you would have that in your head, that maybe that's something that they could do. Let's see. Okay, now we get on to the next question here. I can't think of a good username. Also writes, what are your thoughts on fans who claim you're only a Star Wars fan if you like the original trilogy and the EU and hate the prequels and the Disney-produced films? The Jackasses? The Jackasses. I mean, look, I hate the prequels. I do. But I am for 1 second not going to dare to say that anybody who likes the prequels are not true Star Wars fans. No, they just like what they like. And there's nothing wrong with that. Look, I'll shit on the prequels all day. You know me, I'll shit on the prequels all day, every day. But I will never for a second try to tell somebody who does like the prequels that they shouldn't. If you like the prequels, that's awesome. I celebrate that with you. That doesn't change my opinion, nor should my opinion change yours. I hate the prequels. I think they're terrible. There are a couple of redeeming things about them that I like. Pod race scene, the lightsaber fights, Duel of the Fates. But ultimately, I think they're just awful and terrible. But if you like them, that's awesome. Then I'm glad you're getting some enjoyment out of them, and I celebrate with you that you like them. Backwards thinking Bush League idiots who dare claim that they represent what a true Star Wars fan is, and just shove your head in an oven. I mean, really, and then slam the oven on your face a few times and try to knock some sense into yourself. Just do us all a favor, please. All you are is a divisive thing. You're a cancer in the fandom. People who like that are a cancer in the fandom. They're destructive. They are just tearing things down and they are enemies of Star Wars fandom. People who talk like that are enemies of Star Wars fandom. You don't have to like everything that I like. And I don't need to like everything you like for us to celebrate the same things together and just be happy that we're all fans. And that means there are things we like and things we don't, and that's all cool. You get, assholes like this. There's just, backwards thing. Now, look, there's nothing wrong with these. If there are people who love the original trilogy and love the EU and hate the prequels and hate the Disney-produced films, there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. If that's how you feel about those films, that's great. But when you start drawing lines in the sand and saying, if you don't think the same way I do, you're not a Star Wars fan and blah, 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 that's when you go from being a film fan with different opinions to just being a raging asshole. Film fan with different opinions, raging asshole. So that's just kind of how I think about that. Anyway, Third Man 3 writes, the word going into The Last Jedi was that Lucasfilm was in love with the film. With Rian Johnson having full control and the film being extremely divisive with fans, does that make you more nervous about Solo? Well, it has nothing to do with Solo. Also, it's not that divisive amongst the fans. Like I said, the vast majority of people out there who saw the movie love this movie. I mean, we see it all across the board. However, there are a significant number of people who don't, and that's fine. How does this affect Solo? I don't think it affects Solo at all. I mean, that's a completely different movie with a different filmmaker and a different set of things going into it. So I don't really think there's anything to be encouraged by. Like, I loved The Last Jedi, but that doesn't make me more encouraged for Solo. You may dislike The Last Jedi, which is fine, but that doesn't mean you have any additional reason to be nervous about Solo. Solo's going to be Solo. Whatever it ends up being, good or bad, will in no way be reflected because of how much you like or dislike The Last Jedi, I think. So for me, no, it doesn't affect my nervousness or my anticipation level for it one iota. Personally, that's just me. All right, let's see. Ivan Atorer writes, did you like Rey's saber style development? I did. She was a total hacker in The Force Awakens, and the Force carried her against Kylo, and she improved a bit in The Last Jedi. I'll be honest with you, Ivan, I didn't even really pay that much attention to it myself. I wasn't looking for those things. So I didn't really know. I just know, like, when she was fighting off Unkar Plutt's guys, she seemed pretty efficient at fighting them off. And it wasn't a stretch that since she's been fighting in melee combat with weapons like that her whole life, that she was able to pick up a saber and do some damage with it, especially to a Kylo Ren who had just been shot in the midsection with Chewie's bowcaster and was literally dying. So that whole thing there. But no, I mean, I liked it. I didn't really pay terribly close attention to the style that she was fighting with, but I thought it was fine and it worked for me. So you just clearly looked at it a little more closely than I did. I will pay closer attention the next time I go see the movie. Thanks a lot for sending that in, Ivan. All right. Let's see. I can't think of a good username. We already asked this question. Okay. Now we're caught up. Angel Chang writes, any plans to do future Star Wars trailers live? Like future Star Wars trailer. Do you mean like do trailer reactions to future Star Wars films? If that's what you're asking, I don't know. There are a couple of reactors online that I love very much, that I'm very, very big fans of. But other than them, I'm not all that big on the whole reaction thing. I think 80% of them are fake. Not all of them, but I think a lot of them are faked. Like, I think a lot of people, if you were to watch a trailer with them for the first time and there wasn't a camera on them, I don't think that's how they react. And honestly, I felt like when I was doing like live reactions, I've talked about this before on my show, I became very self-conscious because I started wondering, am I just putting on an act? Am I over-exaggerating things because there's a camera on me? And I felt very uncomfortable with it, you know? To me, it's just not authentic. And some of my favorite reactors out there don't even pretend it's authentic. But, I mean, there's that Day One crew. I can't even, Day One were there. I can't even remember the name of it. But whenever I see one of their videos pop up on YouTube, I watch them because these guys are freaking hilarious. I just love them. I think they're great. And there's a couple of other reactors that I think are very good too. But for the most part, I'm not very into reaction videos per se. I think they're a thing that's kind of come and gone for me, at least anyway. But they're still crazy popular. Crazy popular. A lot of people love them. That's awesome. It's just not something that really works for me per se. All right. Thanks a lot for the question, Angel. Roar Nation writes, I love the comparison you made between Rey and Luke New Hope earlier today. That's literally the same argument I've been making since The Force Awakens. Oh, well, yeah, so for those of you who don't know what he's talking about, I made this comparison that, you know, a lot of people saying, like, oh my goodness, like, how can Rey do this and something? Like, she hasn't barely been training at all. And my thing is like, wait a minute, just wait a second here. Luke spends 5 minutes with Ben, and he's able to immerse himself so much into the Force that he can hit a target this big on a Death Star that even targeting computers were failing to hit, but he could so immerse himself into the Force that he was able to hit what targeting computers couldn't do. Oh, we have no problem with that. That's fine. Yeah, that's good. But Rey was able to swing a lightsaber. How can she do that? Rey can mentally influence a weak-minded stormtrooper. She shouldn't be able to do that yet, and yet we had no problems with Luke Skywalker being able to do all that shit. But anyway, that's just a kind of a funny thing. Thanks so much, Rar. All right, the next one comes to us from Ben Rayner, who writes, chances Lando comes back for Episode 9, slim to none. I think slim to none. I think we've just got to be gracious and glad that we were able to get Lando back in Rebels and be voiced by Billy D. Williams in Rebels. And he does. Billy D. Williams does the voice of Lando in Rebels, which is really great to hear. But I think we're going to have to take our win there. And I don't think he's going to... Hey, maybe they'll shock us and surprise us and have Lando show up to help Leia, you know, now that Han's gone or something like that. Hello? I was going to make a joke that's completely inappropriate, so I'm going to put that away. But who knows, it's possible, but I don't think that's what they're going to do. I just don't think it. All right. Next one comes to us from Ian Nguyendu, who writes, do you think we'll see Act 2 in Episode 9? I don't think so. I think they've moved on. I don't think Rey has any interest in going back there. So no, I don't think we're going to see them go back there in 9. Ben Rayner writes, why do you think Obi-Wan spoke to Rey in The Force Awakens in the vision? Was it just because he was higher up, a higher up Jedi? I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. Like, so why did, who knows? It was a very quiet whisper at the very end of a scene. We just hear, you've taken your first steps. What's the significance of it? What's the significance of Obi-Wan doing that? I don't know. Maybe none. Maybe none. Maybe Obi-Wan's Force Ghost shows up in Episode 9 as Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan's Force Ghost side by side with Luke. Maybe that happens. I don't know. Or maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just, speaking through the Force. No idea. It will be interesting to see if they do connect that to anything, though, as we go into Episode 9. Dylan Johnson writes, why do you keep saying that Phasma is underused? She isn't used much, but she was never built up to be a significant cog. See, I'm going to have to disagree with you there. When we talk about built up, we're talking about what is shown to us in the marketing. And Phasma was all over the marketing. Both in The Force Awakens and in The Last Jedi. I mean, one of the most significant scenes in the marketing for The Last Jedi was that Finn and her, blah, and then she doesn't even show up till the third act of the movie. Has like 3 or 4 lines, and then she falls into a pit of fire. So I'm going to disagree with you there that she wasn't built up. I believe they did build her up because she's a cool-looking character that's going to sell lots of toys. Then they hardly used her at all in the first one, and they hardly used her on the second one. So, yeah, I felt a little bit ripped off by that, to be honest. I didn't like the way they handled Maz Kanata. I do not like the way they handled Phasma in that. Just my opinion. You feel differently, which is awesome. But that is why the way they used Phasma bothers me. All right. Nicholas Glenn writes, when did Rey learn Wookiee? She just met him a few days before The Last Jedi. Who knows? I mean, she might have known 20 Wookiees on Jakku before that happens. Why does anybody know other alien languages? Like, how can, Han sit there and talk to Greedo? How does some people understand what R2 is saying and others don't? I mean, we just don't know. Rey had been living on that planet for 20 years. So how does she know Wookiee? I don't know, but she does. So, and that doesn't seem to be an uncommon thing throughout Star Wars or any of its galaxies, that everybody seems to know 20 or 30 different languages. Whether or not they know the right language at the right time, who knows? But that never stood out to me as being any kind of a problem whatsoever, because it's Star Wars, and that's just the way they deal with things. Let's see. I can't think of a good new username writes, thoughts on people saying the Star Wars franchise is dead and The Last Jedi killed it? Well, let's see. I mean, we're going to find out, right? Because if Star Wars Episode 9 opens to $200 million, you're very wrong. This movie opened to $220 million. It's going to make over $1 billion. I didn't like Transformers, but when a Transformers movie makes $1 billion, the franchise ain't dead. So you can say that all you want. You can talk. Oh, it's dead. It's dead. You can say it 1,000,000 times. If you think that will make it come into reality, good for you. But to suggest that Star Wars is dead, okay, sure. I can make up words too. Ukubleepy. There, I just said something. I said something. It didn't mean anything. So people can say that Star Wars. Now, to people who would say that for them personally, because they disliked The Last Jedi so much that for them Star Wars is dead, then that's a personal thing. Then that is what it is. I mean, that's fine. To people say that, oh, that's it, Star Wars can't move on now. No, this movie's not going to make any money because everybody's going to stay away from it now. And then the next movie's not going to make any money because everybody's going to stay away from it now. I think you're in for a rude awakening. I really do. All right, let's move on. Ian Nguyendu writes, time skip in Episode 9, I think it's needed. We've already kind of addressed that a little bit early. I believe they're going to fast forward about a year or two. Could be wrong, but I think they're going to fast forward a year or two. Next one comes to us from Ben Rayner, who writes, were you a fan of Dooku in Attack of the Clones? Do you think Maul should have been in Clones and Sith instead of being killed in Phantom? No, I think it made sense, and I think it really told us more about the Sidious character than anything else. That, hey, his like henchmen, his apprentices, they're disposable. They're so disposable to him. Maul dies, no problem. He already had, so clearly, Maul died, but Dooku was already somebody that Sidious was grooming. Clearly, he was already working with Sidious. Not like Maul died and then 5 minutes later he just met Dooku. He had been doing this with Dooku for a while. Dooku was a part of the plan, but now Dooku became the prime apprentice. So, no, I was totally fine with it. I mean, look, I liked Maul. I do think he was underused. I don't think they necessarily should have killed him, but I did like the Dooku character. Not enough to save those movies for me, but I like the character, and I like what it told us about Sidious and what it revealed about him. The Wolfman writes, I agree with you that Rey doesn't need to have a Force-sensitive lineage to be highly Force-sensitive, but she had little to no Force and lightsaber training and kicks ass. Even Anakin, who's the most Force-sensitive, trained. Yeah, but remember, they explained that in the movie. Darkness rises, and the light to meet it. She is so, like, naturally, the light side of the Force rose her up to be the balance to the darkness. And in that, she didn't need training. I mean, she needs training to hone and perfect what she can do, for sure. But her raw power is there. And they manifested it. And she didn't act like the most gifted Jedi in the universe in this movie at all. She had some great combat scenes, but she's been fighting combat her whole life. She knows combat. So we've already known that. And she did a couple of Force tricks, lifting the rocks at the end and stuff like that, but nothing that requires like ace-level Jediism. Like, she wasn't able to be Yoda and wave a finger and call down lightning from the sky, right? She's probably got that potential in her to do it, but I think what she was showing, let's put it this way. If you are just naturally the physically strongest guy around, you don't need a lot of weightlifting, specific clean and jerk weightlifting training to clean and jerk a significant amount of weight. You can just do it. Now, once you train in it and you learn the proper technique and all that kind of stuff, you'll be able to do it better and lift even more. But if you're just a naturally big, strong guy, it's not out of the realm of possibility for you to come and do a clean and jerk with a significant amount of weight. You'd be able to do more of it if you had proper training, for sure. But Rey is that. Rey is just naturally in the Force, naturally incredibly strong. So there's certain things she can do without much training at all, but then she'll be able to perfect when she does get training. So that's just the way I saw it. That's why I saw the movie interpreting it to me. Good question, though. Let's see. I can't think of a good username writes, there was a topless Kylo scene in The Last Jedi. Will there be a topless Rey scene in Episode 8? Don't think so. I will say, though, look, I have stood beside Adam Driver. He never struck me as a thick guy, you know? But oh my God, he wasn't just muscular, he was thick in that scene. It's like, geez, this guy has been pumping the weight. Like, he looked big. Not just muscular, not ripped, big. He looked just physically really big. So I was impressed with that. Let's see. Creative Channel writes, do you think there will ever come a time when we get more than one Star Wars movie a year, similar to the MCU? Love your show. Oh, well, I've been having that debate with a couple of my friends for a while now. I don't think so, but here's the thing. While I don't think we'll get more than one Star Wars movie a year, and I'm not even sure I want more than one Star Wars movie a year, with Rian Johnson doing a new trilogy, and it's not episode 10, 11, and 12, and I do believe they are going to move forward and make 10, 11, and 12. And we're going to continue to get the Star Wars story movies. We might be heading into an era where we get more than one Star Wars movie a year. I mean, I've always said it's not going to happen, but it very well could. It very well could. I'm not sure I want it to, but we could be heading that direction. Let's keep our eyes open on that. All right. Antonio de Grandis writes, I agree, John. Luke's senses in The Last Jedi were done right. Though I would have liked a lightsaber battle with Luke and Snoke. Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I'm with you on that. It would have been great to see that fight. I would have urinated and defecated all over the movie theater. I would have been running up and down the aisles, just pissing everywhere, if Luke Skywalker and Snoke got into a lightsaber battle. I totally would have lost my mind, for sure. But that doesn't mean I didn't love what they did with them. I did. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I loved what they did with Luke. But yes, I would have lost my mind. I would have lost my mind if we saw Luke and Snoke have a lightsaber fight, for sure. But the good filmmakers just don't do something for the sake of doing it. And obviously Rian Johnson thought the better narrative path was to go this way. And that's what they did, and I respect them for it. All right. Alex, just a couple more minutes here. I will get through all of these. I know today's show's running a bit long, guys, but hang in there with me. Alex Hajna writes, why was there a map to Luke if he didn't want to be found? You know, it's funny. I've seen a lot of people bring that up. And to me, it's obvious. Just in case. And he only really entrusted that with R2. Like, to me, if, like, something comes up, Leia's going to die unless she gets a kidney transplant from you, Luke. Like, something. He needed there to be some mechanism that in the most dire of circumstances that didn't involve him having to come out and be a Jedi again, that in the most dire of circumstances he could be reached. But only in the most dire of circumstances that did not require him to come out and be Luke Skywalker, the legendary Jedi. Like if he found out his sister was dying and he wanted to be there for her, or something, whatever it is, Luke knew, because even when I go away, like when I was running certain companies and I would go away somewhere for the weekend, I would tell my assistant, I'd say, look, I don't want to be reached. I don't want to work. I don't want to be disturbed. But in case of extreme emergency, this is where you can reach me. And I think it was wise for Luke to have just that, just in case, just in case, just in case. And it was so guarded that he locked it away in R2 and told R2 not to tell anybody. And R2 defended it by powering himself off. So that's how, to which degree and what extent that he went to make sure he would never be found unless the right set of circumstances came along that absolutely required him, that wasn't needing him to save the galaxy or be Luke Skywalker the Jedi. So to me, that was never an issue. Watching the film as a film fan, that transpired and it was never an issue to me. To me, that just made sense. That's just the way I saw it. Maybe you saw it different. All right. Ben Rayner writes, did you miss I've got a bad feeling about this? I'm pretty sure BB-8 said it. I think BB-8 says it in the opening scene in the ship with Poe, and that's what Leia then says, I'm with the droid on this one. That's what at least I got nothing to back that up with, but I think that was him saying the line. At least that's how I interpreted it myself. Alan Gonzalez writes, thoughts on the Last Jedi petition to remove the Last Jedi from canon. Any moron with a keyboard can start a petition. So it's not even worth commenting on. I'm not even going to comment on it. It's so ridiculous. Anthony Pham writes, I rewatched The Last Jedi and realized it was Kylo who first told Rey who her parents were, where they were when they were Force talking. Was he manipulating her to turn? No, it wasn't. The first person to say that her parents were nobody was Rey. And she always knew. And he made her say it first. It's like, you've always known. Say it. Say it. And she's the one who said they were nobody. Because she's always known her parents were nobody. She's like any other orphaned, that we've seen in a lot of movies, these stereotypical orphan children in movies that often when they portray them in movies, they have these things of, my mom and dad are going to come back to get me someday because they love, but she deep down knew her parents were nobody who just discarded her. And she's always known. But she just fooled herself into believing, no, someday my family's coming back. And that wasn't the case. And that's the hardest thing for her to have to face. And I do not believe for a second that was a part of manipulation from thing. And actually, Rian Johnson talked about that a little bit. So, no, I don't believe at all that I think he could use that truth. I think Kylo, much like many Sith will do, Kylo used that truth to try to manipulate her and push her towards the dark side, for sure. But it still was the truth. It was the underlying truth of it all. We saw Vader do things like that as well. Let's see. Max W. Midget writes, I wish we had gotten some flashbacks of Han and Leia interacting with a young Ben Solo and getting to see their conflict and possible disagreement over whether they should send him off with Luke. It would have been fun to see, Max, but was it necessary? Was the narrative steps that the film took, was that scene necessary in order to take us where we were going? It would have been cool to see. I'm with you on that. It would have been cool to see that just as an excuse to get Harrison Ford back in there to play a slightly younger Han Solo. That would have been cool. But ultimately, it would have just been putting the scene in for the sake of putting it in. It ultimately wouldn't have served the narrative, at least not from my point of view. Maybe for you, it would have made it work a little bit better. And then in that case, that's totally legitimate. For me, from my point of view, I just didn't see that as a necessary thing for the narrative. I think it just would have been putting it in kind of for the sake of putting it in. But maybe for other people, maybe like I just read your question and people are going around the world are going, wait a minute, that makes more sense. And maybe that totally would have worked fine. But for me, it wasn't necessary. Gareth Tucson just puts in a super chat. Thank you so much, Gareth. And we're down just the last couple ones here. John, do you anticipate Kylo having an apprentice with the whole rule of two? Will episode 9 revolve around Kylo and Rey fighting over who gets to teach Broome Kid? No, I believe we're not going to see Broome Kid again. He served his purpose. I don't think, remember, Kylo is not about serving the rules of the Sith. He said, let the old things die. He wants nothing to do with it. He's got his Knights of Ren, though. And I do think we're going to see them. Do I anticipate him maybe, though, that he takes on an apprentice? If he does, it won't be because he feels the need to honor the rule of two. Remember, I think there was a part of him that he really wanted to teach Rey. And maybe that sparked something in him that he wants to be a teacher. And maybe there's one special, Knight of Ren that he raises up to be his right-hand man. And he decides to pour his knowledge into him. Maybe that's possible. That's totally one way they could go at it. But again, that whole speech Kylo gives in The Last Jedi about burn the old things. It seems to me that Kylo wants nothing to do with the old ways. And that he's going to move forward from that. Which plays to who his character is, really. He's an petulant child in many ways. So I don't think so, but it's an interesting theory. Let's keep our eyes open for that. All right. This one comes to us from Un Deux, who writes, JJ recently submitted a story for episode 9. Thoughts? I don't know what it is, so I can't really formulate any thoughts when I don't know what that story is that he submitted. Edel Barbosa writes, hello, John. I really like The Last Jedi, but after Luke's death, something changed for me. Star Wars is not going to be the same. He was my childhood hero. The new characters are good, but it's not the same. And I can completely understand where you're coming from with that. I really do. Luke dying is the end of an era. However, Edel, I don't for a minute think that Luke isn't going to be in episode 9. I think his work with Rey is just starting. When Yoda says to Luke, we can't lose Rey, I don't think that was just the importance of saving Rey's life. I think it was about making sure Rey follows her path. And if that's what Yoda was trying to communicate on to Luke, then Luke is showing up in episode 9 as a Force ghost, much like Yoda showed up here. And I believe he will, again, like whether he's going to train or guide Rey, I believe Luke is still going to be around. So, on one hand, I totally get where you're coming from. Luke is the representation of the end of an era of Star Wars. However, I don't think it's over. I do think we're going to see him in the next one. I could be wrong about that, but I think he's going to be back for the next one. All right, let's see. Anthony Pham writes, does the film romanticize aspects of suicide? With Finn attempt, Holdo and Rose's sister sacrifices himself. Felt this was done too often. No, there is a difference between heroic sacrifice and suicide. I totally believe that. There is a massive difference between heroic sacrifice and suicide. Suicide is just, I don't want to live anymore, so I'm going to kill myself. That's suicide. Heroic sacrifice is something totally different. Like, Finn wasn't going to fly his ship into there, fly his skiff into that thing just because he didn't want to live anymore. He didn't see the point of living anymore. That's not why he did it. He thought, this is how I need to, the only way I can save everybody is if I sacrifice. You know, the Admiral, the same thing. She wasn't just like, oh, I've given up hope, Leia, I want to die, so let me stay here. No. She was doing her part to ensure the success of the mission. And the rebellion, it's all about sacrifice. Talk to anybody in the military. It's about sacrifice and being willing to sacrifice. And we saw that these rebels, they were resistance, now they're rebels, they are willing to sacrifice. And I didn't see that as any sort of a connection to suicide or romanticizing suicide at all. Because again, I see them as radically different things. Suicide is about just wanting to end your life. Sacrifice is about being willing to give up your life for a greater cause. I mean, so to me, it's different. They're completely different things. I can see why you'd ask that, but I just don't see them as the same thing. All right, Creative Channel writes, could episode 9 be in 2 parts? No, because that would be episode 9 and episode 10. I don't think they're going to pull that nonsense. I think it's just going to be, if it was going to be in 2 parts, then it wouldn't be in 2 parts. It would just be episode 9 and it would be episode 10. They're not going to do it in 2 parts. The Interweb Show writes, dude, huge fan since 2013. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. What are the odds that she uses the crystal from Luke's saber to build a staff saber like Maul had? Well, I mentioned on another show the other day that I still think that metal staff of hers, I think she's going to rig that into becoming some type of a lightsaber. I think her and Leia are going to work together to go through those Jedi texts that she stole from the tree and figure out how to construct her saber, and she's going to build it into that staff. I totally believe that. Again, nobody's told me that. It's just what I really think is going to happen, and I'll geek out a little bit if that's what actually happens. I'm going to totally geek out if that's what happens. All right, guys, that will do it for today's installment of Star Wars Talk Tuesdays. Thank you so much for being here and making this the best day of the week for me. Just a fellow Star Wars fan getting to talk Star Wars with my other fellow Star Wars fans. Some of whom have the same views as me, some of you have different views of me, and that's what makes it fun. So thank you to all of you guys for being here and participating in the chat. I know today's show went a little bit long, but it was kind of worth it. I had a lot of fun. Don't forget, guys, the John Campea Show is on every day, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Star Wars Talk Tuesday will be back again next Tuesday. Don't forget, if you like superhero movies, we got the Weekly Hero on Friday. I got a bunch of movie reviews coming up here. I've got a review for today. I still got to get up Pitch Perfect 2. I got to get up my Jumanji review. The new Netflix film, Bright. I'm actually going to the premiere of that tonight, so I'm going to see that new Will Smith Netflix movie, Bright, tonight. Watch for that review tomorrow. Whole bunch of things going on here on the channel. If you're not a subscriber to my channel, we have crossed 100,000 subscribers, but we got room for a lot more. Take a second, click on that subscribe button, click the thumbs up button, leave a thought or a comment below. Remember, we're all on the same side together. We can have different points of view and have different opinions and still be on the same team and celebrate the movies and Star Wars all together. But leave your comment below and make sure you follow me on Twitter, simply at John Campea. All right, guys, that will do it for me for this show. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is John Campea, and until the next show, bye-bye.